Welcome to the enigmatic world of Paranormal M. Prepare to be mesmerized by our tales of the supernatural. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, and hit that like button if you could, and stay tuned for our latest mind-boggling stories. Dorm Stalker Mimic. I lived on a college campus, and one night my roommate and I decided to walk across campus, about a mile. We were going to a dining hall that we'd never really been to in order to try some new foods. We get outside and we're greeted by a full campus. People are playing volleyball, they're biking around, they're talking loudly, and just having a good time. The walk itself was mostly fine, with the exception of two spin scooters kind of failing on us. One being completely broken, and the other just refusing payment, which forced us to walk on foot. We left the scooters there and continued to dinner. More on that later. We finished the whole walk in about 5 minutes, and once we were in the building, everything immediately got really weird. It instantly became quiet. Apart from the sounds of cooking, it was damn near silent in the dining hall. Everyone we could see was staring at us. Some were even very obviously taking pictures with their flash on. My food was raw and my roommates overcooked. Needless to say, we left within 10 minutes because we felt extremely uncomfortable. Upon leaving, there was a police car with its flashing lights on but no siren, just sitting out in front of the building with no driver, and, well, we continued past with no issues. But we quickly noticed that there was now absolutely nobody outside. It was anywhere on campus. There was no wind, no sounds of people talking. It was dead silent. Not even crickets, despite it being 6 p.m. on a notoriously party-filled campus. It was eerily dark, and the air just felt thick. It was almost like a fog, but if fog were blacker than black. It was at this point that we conveniently found another spin scooter. But that one wasn't working either. Creeped out, we just started walking back to our dorm. As we got close to the dorm, a group of 2 or 3 boys on spin scooters screamed at us as they passed from behind. Both of us felt like if we were alone, something worse would have happened, but regardless, that was weird. By that point, we were approaching the first spin scooter that we tried to use, and someone was trying to ride the completely broken one, but it actually worked for them, despite its motor being stuck and the brakes being cut for me. We just confusedly stared after them, not understanding why it was broken for us. We finally made it back to the dorm, taking the same walk at the same speed. But it had somehow been nearly half an hour instead of 5 minutes like our first walk had. It was on this walk that we believed we picked up another presence that we began to follow. Or rather, it followed us. That was for the next few months, from November to February, and then we moved off campus. Getting back to the dorm, we had already begun to feel paranoid about everything. But that really sank in as we started to see things outside our dorm room window. We were on the 3rd floor and would catch glimpses of dark figures standing still halfway behind the trees. We closed the curtains when we both saw a face somehow peering into the window despite the height. Freaked out, we began to talk and the previous paranormal experiences that we've had, and in doing so, prompted the entity to begin mimicking the exact experience my roommate had when a family member passed away. On the 1st anniversary of the death, she was listening to a song that was given to her by family members. She felt a warm presence next to her, feeling almost reassuring. She played the song for me, and oddly enough, it's entitled Not Alone. And at the same time in the song, it happened to her in the past, we felt waves of some force from behind, just kind of above us. It eventually felt like there was something between us obstructing our hearing of one another. It wasn't warm like she had described. It was instead cold and paralyzing. But it was tangible to both of us even though we mentioned it. I could see a reflection in a nearby lamp, and the other lights positioned between us kept disappearing from the reflection. The wardrobe across from us kept cracking open on its own, which was weird, considering how much force it took to open on purpose. This stopped whenever we started talking about it, but started right back up if we ever mentioned it again that night. The dorm room itself felt off ever since then. We'd started to see normal shadows in the room grow darker than ever before. We had new shadows appear from nowhere. We thought that we saw things out of the corner of our eyes, faces peering through the decorative plants, dark hands around the doorframe, figures crouched behind the chairs, and shadows darting underneath the beds. On top of these, we continued to see figures and faces outside our window. At this point, we no longer felt like we belonged on campus at all. People consistently stared at us, even going so far as to turn around while driving just to look. People stared from across the street or even way ahead or behind us, and more pictures of us were taken nearly every time we left the dorm room. It began to mimic sounds that were common. Someone had been sick before winter break and was coughing for a while, but the sound continued after break. Although it sounded uncanny, as though the muffling of the sound through the wall was artificial. Perhaps that it was being produced in the room with us. The sounds became predictable and were just somehow wrong. First it was the coughing, then it began to mimic the sound of a very distinct dangly earring that my roommate wears, even when I was alone. She even took it out to test it, and we both still heard it. Began to whistle at us too. Neither of us can find an example of what it sounds like anywhere online, but it's a single high-pitched whistle that typically has a little upsweep at the end. I have perfect pitch, and eerily enough, the sounds were exactly the same every single time. The same pitch, the same length, and the same tone consistently. The whistles, coughs, and earring sounds, it was like listening to a loop of those sounds around us all day, every day. On some of the worst days, the color of the light itself would look completely different in the dorm room when we felt its presence, but we both always noticed the exact moment it returned to normal. During the weekends, we were lucky enough to be able to drive home and stay over, but the sounds followed us. They could even be heard from inside the home. On some occasions, figured out exactly how to mimic our voices, almost exactly. I've heard her say my name in the house when she hadn't said anything. We both heard a separate disembodied voice as well, typically just a loud, My roommate used to get regular sleep paralysis. Well, I've never had it myself. And on one such night, we were seeing an abnormal amount of the creepy stuff mentioned earlier. She was slipping into sleep paralysis. All of a sudden, while I was talking, I passed out and saw the entity's face, up close and personal, to which I immediately woke both of us, and the entity left right after that. And since then, her sleep paralysis has completely stopped happening. I've attached a picture of the face that I drew that night because I couldn't get it out of my head. We might have to brighten it, it's a wee bit dark. All of this added to a lot of other stresses that we were facing at the time, which prompted us to make the decision to move away from campus, after which all of the activity stopped entirely. We're not too freaked out by any of this. We both had our experiences before, but this absolutely felt like the most hostile. It often felt dangerous and like it was out to get us. Beyond just being scared, it physically instilled feelings. We're mostly wondering if anybody's had similar experiences. Something pulled my hair today. I'm a housekeeper at a resort. This happened in a unit I was cleaning today. Spooked me so bad that I didn't even want to clean that room. So I was standing in the middle of the bathroom looking at my phone. I had my hair tied back in a low ponytail and a clip sort of pinning my hair to the back of my head to keep it off my neck. I have really long, heavy, and thick hair. To make my hair stay in any sort of style, it has to be tight to my head or it'll fall out in minutes. Something lifted all of my hair over my head and dropped it. It was so scary, I literally jumped and looked all around the bathroom to try to figure out really how it happened. I was standing dead in the center of the bathroom away from all the stalls, and the only thing in the ceiling is one of those light fan fixtures that are in the actual ceiling. Nothing could have caught my hair. It couldn't have been static. Static doesn't move the entirety of your hair in one big clump. And I was completely alone. Whatever it was, or whatever happened, it didn't hurt me. Maybe it was just curious or something. I don't even know if I fully believe in the paranormal despite having several encounters. What do you think about this? Any logical explanation on my levitating hair? Guardian angel appearing physically at different points in my life. So at different points in time throughout my life, I've encountered a specific man. Always the same face, same height, same age, same ethnicity, etc. And generally during very hard times and turning points. Each encounter has been alike. During some of the most difficult moments of my life, I'll find myself at the beginning of breaking down or in the middle of it. And this man will appear seemingly out of nowhere and knowing nothing of my situation, offering words of comfort or advice. I have a few very distinct memories of this happening, and the latest happened yesterday. My grandfather, who raised me, had been in and out of the hospital for the last few months. He's on his journey out of saying goodbye. He is on his journey out of our world, and has been very difficult saying goodbye to him. After receiving worst-case scenario news from one of his surgeons yesterday, I took a walk to call some loved ones in the hospital. That's where he's being treated and ultimately got lost, winding up in a very lower level of their basement. When I got on the elevator to go back to the main floors, I was overwhelmed and exhausted, and at this point, beside myself crying. Somebody ran to stop the elevator doors, and it stepped kind of on a Hispanic man, dude, like in his mid-30s, whose face, well, I would know anywhere. This is the man who shows up in my worst moments every single time. He said hello and asked me why I was crying. I simply answered, "Really long day and some very bad news." His reply came with a wisdom and authority I do not want to discredit. Well, simply he was a good Samaritan offering a comforting thought, but cannot ascertain myself to believe, well, it was anything earthly. Is this my guardian angel or ancestor or another force appearing when I need it most? Can't chalk this up to simply coincidence or my mind playing tricks on me. I've experienced this on multiple occasions, and it always is the exact same person. Although time has passed, and even with the very slight chance that it could just so happen to be the same human in the right place at the right time every single time, they surely would have aged, and maybe they would remember me as well by this point. Has this or anything similar happened to anyone else? Starting to feel a little bit crazy, but I would love some insight or validation from anybody who might know more about the spiritual realm and how it might be in contact with us here. Interdimensional interference. My name is Jenna Durfee. Back in 2012, my family unknowingly moved across the street from my ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend's house. My ex, who I hadn't stopped thinking about since we broke up in 2010, whom I thought was my twin flame. I came outside from visiting my family and was standing outside across the street. I was sure I manifested this or that it was fate uniting us once again. It honestly felt like a cruel cosmic joke from the universe. We lived across the street for a year before speaking to each other. Flash forward to 2013, and this is when it started getting really weird. My brother passed away, and I had a premonition of his death. I'll get to this later. My ex decided that it's the right time to tell me he missed me and never wanted things to end between us the way that they did. He comes back into my life, and just kind of to dip out a few weeks and a few text messages later. Around the time he disappears again, I get a friend request of social media despite not having been active on it for years. The friend request? A man from Copenhagen, Denmark, under the guise of Alejandro No Name. He looks identical to my ex, and there were striking parallels between their lives at the time. I believe him to be one of my ex's doppelgangers. I've attached pictures of my ex and Mr. No Name. The resemblance is uncanny. So, he begins taunting me with posts. I message to inquire who he is, and he opens up dialogue by sending me a picture of 3 scars on his stomach from fights he had been in. Here's where I will lose some of you reading this. My brother knew how uncomfortable I was being across the street from that loser ex-boyfriend. So he mentioned one day that he had stabbed that kid 3 times. At the time, I knew it wasn't true and didn't address it. My brother was sick, and he would kind of black out sometimes. So the question is, why is a guy in another country taunting me? And why did he have scars from wounds that my brother mentioned were intended for my ex-boyfriend? What's going on here? I had an OBE with my brother before he passed away, to the point that he said I was in his room and, tapped him on the shoulder. I was awoken by him screaming. That's a story that I can expand if I'm asked, but it was also a premonition because I heard somebody grasping for breath before he awakened me, and with his yells. He overdosed in that room in the bed 2 weeks later. A light bulb shattered on a lamp in the room that he overdosed in a week after his death. I was in his room thinking about him, and as I approached the lamp to hit the switch, the light bulb shattered. I believe it to be residual or psychokinetic energy that caused it to shatter, but I'm more than open to other theories. I also had a premonition of my dad's death. I can explain upon that as well, if it were inquired of me. Paranormal or coincidence? I've been thinking about a scary situation that happened 6 days ago. Here it is. It was around 12 to 1 or midnight. Once I entered my room, I felt uncomfortable. The feeling I had was unusual, as I only had this feeling when something bad is happening. Like when I get those random intuition moments when my mind tells me something is going to happen and it really does. However, I stared at a misplaced pillow, which had been above the closet for weeks. I stared deeply and felt sucked into it, as if my eyes were zooming in and felt really strange. My mind was telling me that it was going to fall. It was like a voice was coming from my mind. But I tried to dismiss my thoughts and not care. Then I turned back to see a drawing of mine. It was a cat with big eyes. The eyes were as if they were moving. But I also tried to dismiss this thought and continue. I thought that I was tired and hallucinating. Then I looked at a bag that I had forgotten to take out, so I looked out for 3 seconds and went back to my room, and I couldn't believe what I saw. I've seen the pillow lying down far away from me from the closet. I got chills. I tried to explain it by putting it back to where it was and applying different theories on how it could have fallen. was unbelievable because it fell far away from the closet, and considering the height of the pillow and how it was fixed above the closet, those theories didn't make sense. There was no way it could have been a coincidence because it had been fixed up there for weeks. Once I've thought of it, it fell. So I thought it might be a ghost, but I really don't believe that ghosts can touch anything that belonged to humans. Or it might be my eyes that moved it. The situation's not the first, and among all past situations, this is the scariest. I'm not a fan of supernatural things, but we really don't know what's hidden there in the world. There are many things that we can't explain because we don't know everything. Weird experience in hospital waiting room. I was alone in the waiting room listening to music, waiting for my mother to arrive so that way we could go home. The waiting room is next to a staff-only corridor of some sort, and while I was waiting there I saw a bunch of nurses pushing an empty stretcher. 2 or 3 or 5 minutes later, they just come back running with the patient covered with a blanket. I guess he was dead. Shortly after this, approximately 20 seconds, my headphones crack and the music stops. Thought someone was calling me, like on the phone, because the music stops automatically when someone calls me. But nobody was calling me, so I just turned the music back on. 1 second after doing this, I start feeling cold, strong gusts of wind right on my face and my hands. So obviously I start looking for the air conditioner thinking, what the fuck are these people doing? It's so cold. On the side I was feeling the cold there, and there was no air conditioning, just walls. But the weird thing was, the wind didn't feel like the usual blow. It was like a targeted pressure. It didn't blend or extend, and after freaking out a little bit, it just stopped. I had a dream, and I don't know if it was a visitation or just part of my subconscious mind. My stepmom's mother died 15 years ago, and while she was definitely a presence in my life since I was a baby, I wouldn't say we were substantially close. Just normal childhood memories of her babysitting me or going over to her house for occasional dinners and holidays. She always had cute stories to tell me about growing up, and despite her being known as a sour, disagreeable woman, she always took a liking to me in my life and was always kind. I mention the nature of our relationship because I'm not sure we ever had the type of bond that would require her to visit me in the afterlife. I wasn't actually related to her, and I don't know, I just feel like why would she bother? She has actual grandchildren who, as far as I know, I've never seen her. After she passed, I had a dream that she was getting out of a car, and after I went to give her a hug, she collapsed in my arms. I woke up feeling that it was like a goodbye. Last night, after 15 years, I see her entire, like my line of vision, and I immediately know that she's there in my dream. Like I was shocked and surprised to see her because being a lucid dreamer, I was fully present and aware of what encounter was like and what it was supposed to mean. She didn't speak, but her presence was very vivid, and I just remembered thinking that she's there to tell me to get my shit together. I've been going through kind of a rough patch lately and haven't been on top of my game. I've been drinking more than I should and feeling really more stressed out than usual. I just remember experiencing an eerie sense of disbelief at seeing her and thinking, she's here to tell you to do better. The rest of my family and closest friends live in another country, so they aren't here to see if I'm okay. And surface level I am, so anybody to really know anything deep about me would have to be sort of omniscient. I woke up almost immediately after acknowledging her presence in the dream. And now I just don't know whether something like that is real or if it's really just a part of the imagination. Nothing recent has triggered any thought or memory of her, and it's not like I heard her name and then fell asleep and dreamt about her. I really had no reason to conjure up at random. How can we know what's real and what's all in our head? Good question. Have you ever looked at a complete stranger and felt an intense supernatural connection? This happens very rarely with me, but it first started when I was a young kid, in maybe the first grade. Now it is brief and fleeting, but can happen when making eye contact with someone in the subway or even standing behind a stranger while waiting in line somewhere. I'll look at a person and experience a surreal sensation almost to my core, like I knew them. Except it feels deeper than that. Sometimes it felt like we could have been lovers, but sometimes it feels more overbearing, kind of like they could have inflicted harm. I don't feel bad in their presence in the moment, but there's a squeamish feeling associated with the notion that there may be a power dynamic unable to place. The feeling is both comforting and familiar, but almost uncomfortable because it's just too familiar. I label this experience as supernatural because there's no way I could have known these people in this lifetime. The feeling lends a nervous vibration that extends the metaphysical. It feels both innate and otherworldly. I don't have any special abilities, I wish, and I can't communicate with ghosts. I would be too terrified to do it anyway, and as such, I haven't a clue what this sensation might mean. Has anyone else experienced anything like this or had a possible explanation? Doppelganger. This happened quite a few years back now, but it's something that's stuck with me and I can't even really wrap my head around it now. I was in high school at the time, and every day my mom would unlock the door for me to walk in, so it was quick and easy for me to just get in. I had came home from high school this one day, and I went to walk in, but the door seemed to be locked. So I tried the key in the door, and for some weird reason it wouldn't turn at all. So I knocked on the door multiple times. No answer. I knocked and still nothing, so I waited for a while until I knocked again. My mom had pulled open the door looking angry and confused, asking why I went back outside. I told her I couldn't get in and had been outside for the entire time. We sat down, began to talk about it, and this is where it gets a bit creepy. From her point of view, she had seen me walk in with my bag on the opposite shoulder, and my eyes were more blue than usual. They're usually green, but sometimes look blue. She told me I looked angry. She had a feeling as though she couldn't talk to me yet, as it seemed maybe I was having a bad day. I, in air quotes, walked off and disappeared into the room without talking. Then she heard me knocking and outside again with my bag on the usual shoulder, and my eyes were green. From my point of view, I was stuck outside and she couldn't hear me, but from hers, she had seen me already, and the strange thing, really, is that she couldn't hear me knock at all, and the door was not locked. She had pulled open the door with ease. Doppelganger? Creepy daycare experience. So this was probably in 2013. I was 6 years old. I couldn't tell if I was either at daycare or at my dad's, but I believe daycare. Everything around me was so colorful, like a rainbow, and toys which I didn't have at home. I remember sitting down on the floor watching old Disney movies and an old vintage TV with a few other kids. The daycare workers, I believed, were serving us food such as crackers and milk, and after that they sent us to bed, but in the same room. We were all sleeping on those foamed puzzled mats and blankets and pillows. My younger self at the time didn't want to sleep with a bunch of other kids I didn't know. I suffered severe social anxiety as a kid and didn't like playing or talking to other kids. I still do to this day. The daycare workers even put on soothing music to help us sleep using a radio player that they'd play old Disney music on as well. I remember they played The Lion Sleeps Tonight from The Lion King. The song quality comes from that radio sounds so horrible that the song was glitching and freezing. The lights were also turned off, which creeped the shit out of me, and I started to cry. I missed my dad and I wanted to go home. I continued to cry for like an hour or God knows what. I couldn't stop crying for how scared I felt. The song was also looped, which made it more scarier for me. All the kids that were in the same room as me were all asleep. I remembered that there were also toys beside me as well, an old vintage dollhouse, vintage toys such as those old Fisher-Price, kind of ones, and I saw one of them moving in the corner of my eye. I remember one of them mocking my cries, like those toys when you say something and they repeat the same thing as you. Scared the shit out of me. My heart just dropped. I immediately stopped crying. I ended up throwing my pillow at the toys as I got up and crawled away from them. I then crawled over to a few kids that were asleep and laid beside them because I was scared shitless. I ended up falling asleep and walking up as all the kids got picked up by their parents and my dad. I didn't say anything to them about what happened because I was confused about the whole thing. I never got to go back to that daycare ever again, but I had older sisters that babysitted me now. I still remember this because this was probably my first ever paranormal experience, and it scared the shit out of me. My church is definitely haunted. Here are a few stories of the ghosts. Story context. My church was built in 1875, so it'll be 150 years old next year. Stop roasting me for accidentally saying 100. No problem. It's a big church and has 3 levels, but most paranormal activity happens on the top floor where the sanctuary and offices are. Directly off the sanctuary is a meeting and lunchroom. We call it the GPR room. The choir members wait to come out to service in the room, and all the committees meet there too. A lot of activity happens here. None of the ghosts truly like crowds, but my mother cleans the church, and I'll help her so often when I'm in the church with very few other living people. All this activity, plus other stories I'll share later, has happened in the last 3 years of going to this church. Story number 1. Whispering Man. In the GPR room, there's a male ghost who whispers in your ear, like directly into it. There's no warning, so he scares you any time, and his tone sounds confused, like he's asking a question. He'll repeat the question a minute or so later, and if you don't talk back to him, but the thing is, you can't understand the words as they're muffled, so you have to tell him, "Sorry, sir, can't understand you," and he'll repeat the question or leave. He only talks to you if you're alone in the GPR room, and only once did he speak to me when there was another person in the room. At least me, my mother, and my sister have experienced the Whispering Man. I've heard about him about 4 times now. Chatty Ladies, Story 2. In the sanctuary, there used to be 2 fancy green felted wooden chairs directly behind the altar. When the altar area was renovated, the green chairs were moved to a different area of the sanctuary. Sometimes I'd be here laughing, and, well, I guess rather I would hear laughing, and a conversation would be coming from the area where the chairs were located in. It would sound like feminine voices, and I'd hear their voices in the pauses between. One lady would talk, another answering back to her. Sadly, again, their words were muffled, and the chairs were recently sold, so I haven't heard of them in a while. I'm the only one to have experienced them. Story number 3. The little girl. There's a little girl who probably is no older than 8, who is the only ghost that you can actually see. She wears a white dress from, I could tell from Googling dates back to the late 1800s and early 1900s. She had Shirley Temple curls, and she appeared like a physical person but was gray like a black and white movie. She often plays and giggles at the back of the sanctuary. But one night last fall, I was sitting in the GPR room practicing music for choir. I looked up in the doorway to the hallway because I thought I saw something, and I definitely did. The little girl was pinching the sides of her dress up so she didn't trip and twirling around and around, watching her dress catch the air and blow up against a giant smile on her face. I sat there watching her, smiled to myself. I was mesmerized by the pure joy she was having as the pianist played the song. The ghost girl looked up and saw me watching her, and just as quickly as I noticed her, she suddenly vanished with the blink of an eye. My mother and sister have heard her giggle, and my friend saw her, and we think, more of a swoosh of her dress as she went running across the back of the sanctuary where she plays. Gran has saved my life multiple times. So I've had a couple of incidents in my life, and these popped into my head today because, while grocery shopping, I passed a woman wearing Aqua Net hairspray. It's like a smell I associate with my grandma. So my gran passed a month before I turned 16. She was my rock and helped raise me. She lived 900 feet down the road from us. I spent as much time at her house as I did at home. I was devastated when she passed. But throughout my life, she's been about, still looking after me. The first time was when I was 18. I was at a friend's house. There were 5 other people that night, and me, my 2 best friends, the parents, and younger brother. We'd stayed up talking about graduation and our summer plans, when suddenly we all heard Gran's voice. "Girls, there's a fire!" Her room was in the walkout basement, and we all kind of looked at each other like, "You heard that, right?" Well, it came again, only louder. "Girls, there's a fire!" We both bolt out the door, and the stairs are full of smoke. So out the door we go, screaming for her parents and brother. We run around to the front and start pounding on windows. The whole kitchen area was engulfed in flames. We got our family out, and a neighbor called the fire department. The second time I was in my early 20s and living in the Rockies. I was camping with my then significant other in Medicine Bow National Forest. We were doing backcountry, so not in one of the campgrounds. Beautiful, clear night. I wake up horrified and confused. That's when I suddenly hear softly, "Leave now, pack out." I sit up and listen. I hear normal night sounds, and I kind of shake it off as a dream and lay back down. Suddenly, Grant's yelling, "Pack out!" My significant other sits bolt upright. "Who's yelling?" I'm like, my Gran." He's like, "Huh?" And there she is again. "Go now." We sit there wide-eyed for a minute when he says, "Time to go." He was indigenous and, wasn't messing about. We dropped camp, packed up, and hiked down to the truck. The next afternoon, we went into the ranger station to pull out our names off the book when we found out a couple about half a mile from where we were camping were struck by lightning in their tent the night before. The third time wasn't as life or death as the others, but it was still something that saved me. I was 25, and the significant other from the previous story had become my husband. When just after our small human was born, that's a weird way to say that, he passed away unexpectedly. Sorry. I was a widow with a newborn. I was devastated and lost and just kind of existed. My baby was the only thing I had anymore. I moved back home to have help, and I couldn't have stayed in the place I'd lost my husband. You lost your baby or your husband? I'm a little bit confused. I'd been home for a few months, but I was very depressed and had postpartum issues too, and I went to work, cared for my son, and slept. I didn't want to be anywhere near my baby, but one night I was sitting on the back porch rocking the baby, watching it rain. Suddenly I felt someone sit on the swing with me. I could smell her Aquanet and lotion and the smell of her fresh cup of coffee, and then I felt a hand on my knee. He's fine, sweetheart. Your man's getting on with the house fire with your uncle and pawpaw. He wanted you to heal, to be yourself again. I was like the other times. I didn't physically hear her. It was more in my head. But it was a turning point for me. I got myself into therapy, and it wasn't a quick fix, but I learned how to deal with my grief. When I met my current significant other, my baby was 7. We were friends first, and I still wasn't sure I wanted to even have a partner again until I was packing to move and found a box of Grant's letters and such. One was a letter she had wrote to Pawpaw after he had passed. She promised him that she wouldn't waste away without him, that even though they had loved each other, she wouldn't lock up her heart if somebody special came along. So she helped me decide that he was worth risking my heart again. The most recent was a bit over a decade ago, and I was pregnant for a second small human. A baby. I worked a closing shift. I was on my way home at about 10:30 p.m. Dark country, 2-lane blacktop road with cornfields on both sides. Had the top off of my Jeep, because it was a mild September night and I was 7 months pregnant. I wasn't going fast, probably 50 miles an hour, and as I was coming up to an intersection where the crossroad had to stop, the smell of cornfields was suddenly gone. Instead, I smelled Aquanet and my Grand's lotion, almost overwhelmingly so. Then, clear as a bell, her voice said, "Stop." I slapped the brakes, sliding to a stop, stalling out as a full-sized truck blows through the intersection at 20 feet in front of me. The smell got even stronger for a brief moment before it was gone. I was so shaken up it took me 3 tries to start my Jeep. Those are the ones that really make me believe that the other side isn't as far away as we think. Boyfriend and I had supernatural experience at the same time. So my boyfriend and I went to an exhibit on the supernatural at our local art museum. Some of it was really cool with beautiful paintings of angels. And some exhibits there were creepy as fuck, like real voodoo dolls, ghosts caught on film, etc. After the show we got home and there was just a general bad vibe. We ended up getting in an argument and sleeping in separate rooms. Middle of the night at like 3 a.m., I woke with a start from a nightmare that a man with a knife was banging on the door, then burst in to come kill me. Heart racing, I popped up and rushed to the door, and I had the immediate urge to lock it. My hand was on the doorknob when logic kicked in. Don't lock the door, it was just a dream. I didn't want my boyfriend to think I was being passive-aggressive, locking him out of the bedroom. So I took a few deep breaths to collect myself, decided not to lock the door, and was in 2 steps from the bed when my boyfriend then burst into the room, scaring the living shit out of me. He was more frantic than I've ever seen him. "What is it? What's the matter?" "What? I'm fine." He was so distraught that his knees literally buckled, and then he said, "I heard you screaming, and it sounded like you were getting attacked." I've screamed in my sleep before, but it's always woken me up. I remember doing that in this instance. Also, the timing of it. I had already been awake long enough to walk across the room and back. Then, as an added creep factor, I noticed that the door had a long crack from the handle down to the side of the part that fits into the jamb. At some point, the door had been locked and forced open, then repaired. Who knows what it was? Something creepy followed us from the event? Some remnant of something that had happened before in the room? Amnesia of sleep screaming? Pure coincidence. I'll leave it up for you to decide. But after, we definitely slept in the same bed the rest of the night. Nothing like that threat of murder for instant reconciliation. My only legit encounter. A few years ago, I went to go hang out with my friends. While the girlfriend was at work, her boyfriend picked me up with her kid, James. He's important. Once Dude and I arrive at the apartment, it's just the three of us. We're pretty much waiting for the other friend to come home. Now, as the night comes and dinner is over, getting James ready for his bath, I decide to stick around instead of being alone in the bedroom. So I'm in James's room just monitoring the dude, giving his kid a bath, and James looks at me and claims there's someone behind me when there isn't. So, Dude isn't the father, but they believe that James' bio-father had passed and somewhat haunted the place. I don't see anyone behind me, but I do feel their presence, and James just keeps pointing behind me. So a little freaked out, I just join them in the bathroom and hang out. I don't remember much else, although the main part that happened that night is when Dude and I were reading to James for bed. I sat in the middle and just helped him read, and the dude sat next to me watching the whole thing. So three of us are on the bed. No one else is in the house. They only have one car. And as I'm reading, James looks toward his closet and he points again, stating that someone is coming out of it. I can't see anything and I'm just staring at Dude like, what the hell? James still goes as he's claiming and comes out. He's going toward the door. The room is quiet and we're kind of waiting on something. Before I frickin' know it, there were just 3 faint knocks on the door. They were like 4 or 5 feet away from it. So this guy's close, and I was so scared hearing that coming out of nowhere. I didn't care if Dude had a girlfriend. I was not gonna let it see my face anymore. I just hidden it and hidden the shoulders. Eventually, I guess needing to pick up his girl, Dude walked me out. I reminded him, those 3 knocks could have been the mock of the Trinity, and all I got in response was, "Don't say that." But yeah, anyway, pretty freaky. I'm sure there's worse cases. Why am I the only one the spirit bothers? I've lived in my apartment building for about 5 years now with my fiancé and his son. The building is old, originally built in the 1920s. What I cannot explain is why I, the only female in the house, am the only person who experiences anything paranormal. My fiancé works midnights, so I'm home with just my stepson at night. The activities only ever really occurred in her bedroom. I will feel someone come and sit down on the bed and start to pet my hair, and trust me, I'm not sleeping. It's happened far too many times over the past 5 years. I've heard things rattling in her closet, whispering in my ear to wake me up. Another bonus is my 2 cats go frickin' bonkers in our bedroom, completely spaz out, hissing at the closet of our bed and staring at a single corner for over long periods of time. I don't know, the spirit whom I've nicknamed Mr. Ghost, more of a self-comforting thing, only comes out to bug me when I'm alone in my bedroom. I've stayed at my mom's house for a month and to help her after serious surgery and had no paranormal experiences. only in the bedroom at my apartment. So my question is it normal for a spirit to be more forthcoming to a specific person? Why is the spirit only bothering me? Ask Reddit. When I was in college, I used to stay at my buddy's house, and I would come to town on the weekends to see my girlfriend. He would always tell me odd stories about the guy who used to live in the house before him. Wrapped up in drugs, in and out of jail for numerous different things, and just an overall very odd fella, top it all off. And anyway, there was a kind of shed connected to the side of the house where there was a bunch of boxes of the previous person's belongings that were left behind. That's when the guy went to jail the last time. I was bored one day at the house doing some cleaning and found myself going through these boxes. There were files upon files of court documents from every time this guy had been locked up. I was probably doing a little more snooping than I'm proud to admit, but hey, I wanted to know what this guy's background was like, and the court documents sucked me in. As I'm browsing through the many manila envelopes, I came across one that was clearly labeled as witchcraft, with a bunch of weird notes and phrases scribbled all over it too. I opened it, pulled out a huge stack of papers that were all photocopies of what looked like a very old book about witchcraft. My buddy had just gotten off work and walked through the door around the same time I stumbled across this witchcraft envelope. He lets his dog outside quick, and when he comes back in, I start showing him the super creepy witchcraft envelope that I stumbled upon. I look back into the now empty manila envelope and I see that there's a crumpled up piece of paper in the very bottom. Pull it out, uncrumple it, and it's like an older newspaper clipping of a Target ad. The only thing on the ad was a picture of a polar bear, a Target store logo, and the phrase "Dig Out" written in big bold red letters. It was at this very moment I knew I fucked up. I looked at it for a moment in awe, held it up and turned it around for my buddy to look at. And at that very moment, his dog started barking louder and meaner than I'd ever heard her bark before. Her eyes were locked on a certain spot up by the ceiling, and she would not calm down. Hair standing up on her back, growling, barking, the whole works. I immediately threw every single piece of paper back in the envelope, put the envelope back in the box, and put the box back right where I found it. The dog started to calm down once the papers were back in the envelope. Even my buddy said that he had never seen his dog react to anything that way before. It was without a doubt the creepiest, spookiest thing that has ever happened to me. I couldn't help but think that there was a specific reason the guy put that newspaper clipping in the bottom of his witchcraft envelope. As if it were to never be dug out and went through. I can still see that newspaper ad in my head today with the big red bold letters saying "Dig Out." Super sketchy. I should have known better than to dig that stuff out and go through it. What did I saw? Otherwise known as what did I see? Or what is it that I saw? When I was around 12 or 13, I went out with my friend in the evening. She was the same age, and after a few hours, my mom called me to go home, so I had to hurry. I chose a shorter path, which I usually wouldn't because it's a dark street with few lights. But to be honest, I always had goosebumps from that street, but I had to be home in time. I was fast walking, so I was like a few steps ahead of my friend, and then I had a feeling that somebody's watching me. I looked beside me and I saw something which I will never forget. There was a school next to me when I saw a man without a head. It was sitting on a bench wearing a black suit, and it was huge with long legs. It doesn't even have a neck, only shoulders. Although the entity doesn't have a head, I felt his gaze on me. I wasn't able to move or talk, only to stare at him. It felt like minutes, but it was only a few seconds. When I heard my friend calling me, I started to run without a word when I noticed she's not following me. I looked back and she was staring at the thing. I screamed at her to run and she followed. Thank God. We were running for our lives without a word. That's when we were in front of my house. I asked her what she saw, and her reply was, "A man without a head." She saw exactly the same thing as me. Next day we visited the school and there was no bench there. We're 22 by now and we still don't know what did we saw at that night. Ask Reddit. Obligatory not at night nor long haul trucker. I took a road trip with my parents and my partner. Took it out west, Tulsa to the Grand Canyon, almost exactly 2 years ago. We took I-40 west and didn't have any road stories to tell other than my dad's shock at how bad Tucumcari had gotten since he was last there. On the way back, we took 412. That's a straight shot from the Grand Canyon to home. I have 2 creepy stories from that ride. The less creepy story happened just east of the Navajo Reservation in New Mexico. That was after we drove over the highest part of our trip. I want to say some 1,200 feet. It had been plowed just a day earlier, and the snow was easily twice as high as the car at the saddle of the pass. Coming down, we drove past a gate to the farm, and there had a few lynched effigies out in front, and a sign that was old enough that you couldn't read it. It was the only sign of a human habitation, and we had only seen this after hours, excluding the road, of course. Pretty creepy, especially given that the whole sort of ensemble had clearly been there for quite a long time. The creepier story happened in Arizona on the reservation itself. We came over a hill to a long stretch of pretty straight highway and saw a man walking on it pretty far out. He was wobbling around and into the road, a simple no-shoulder, 1 lane per side strip of asphalt. As we got closer, it appeared he wasn't really wobbling. Then, when we got pretty close, it became obvious that he was throwing broken glass into the highway. We slowed down from about 90 to about 35, just to avoid him. He lunged at the car as we passed. The eastbound lane glistened with bottle debris. We got it there as fast as we could, but the creepiest part is where this happened. It was roughly noon in the middle of a high desert, and a minimum of 15 minutes of driving at 90 to 100 miles per hour, if not 30 minutes. Either way from the nearest building with no side roads or dirt paths of any kind branching off. He had clearly walked all. Some paranormal things I've experienced. To start off, I lived in an old house and it was built around the 1940s, but it's been renovated many times in the past 18 years. There was an older woman who lived here before us, but I'm not exactly sure if she died here. If she did, then that might explain things. First time I experienced something odd was when I was around 7 or 9 years old, maybe. It was Christmas, and I was laying on the floor in our living room with my family. I looked up and saw a figure staring into the room through the window. Our front door leads to our living room, and we have a light just outside the front door. The light was turned on, and I could see the figure looking in with a smile. It also had dark eyes. I was really scared and kept staring back at it, but none of my family members could see it. This happened maybe a couple of years back when I was home alone and with my sister. We were in the living room again and heard steps coming from the stairs that sounded exactly like our dad's steps. But there wasn't anybody else in the house, and it was probably 3 or 4 steps that we heard. My sisters told me that she heard steps coming from upstairs before. My newest experience happened a few weeks back when I was upstairs in our bedroom playing my sister's piano with the door open. We have vinyl flooring in the upstairs rooms, which basically makes the floor kind of slippery and hard, if that makes sense. We can hear when something moves against it easily due to how hard the flooring is. So when I was playing, I started to hear this noise as if someone was scratching the floor. We didn't have any windows open at the time, and we don't have mice in our house during summers. I shook it off, but I kept hearing it, and eventually got too creeped out to keep playing and went downstairs. I was also home alone at the time, and the noise came from the next room for sure. Ultra high definition hyper-real ghost. When I was about 16 years old, around 1989, I was in my bedroom trying to fall asleep in bed. I could only toss and turn, and out of nowhere I spotted a pair of shoes and legs on the wall adjacent to my bed. So I did a double take, and to my horror, there's an old man suspended against the wall. His back rested against the ceiling. The exceptional thing about this ghost was his exquisite detail. He was an elderly-looking gentleman wearing a 3-piece suit. His hands were clasped and rested on his lap. I could make out the textures of the fabric in his clothing, the texture of his shoes, his skin, his hair. He looked perfectly real, or even hyper-real, except for the fact that he was completely white. Everything about him the same shade of white, clothing and skin and hair with a tinge of blue that emphasized his texture detail. Almost as if he was carved from chalk that illuminated a sort of luminescence. However, the light did not radiate on other surfaces around him as normal light sources do. He didn't move. He was like a statue, a terrifying, out-of-place, mind-melding statue. My heart rate was very high, and I was completely petrified. My adrenaline was pumping at full force, yet I was having trouble accepting what my eyes were showing me. So I turned my head to look away, and then turned to look again because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. When I looked back, he was still there, not moving, and I was too afraid to move. I stared at him for a while and finally had to retreat my gaze. I closed my eyes and looked away and didn't look again. I lay in bed for hours, terrified with my covers over my head. Eventually, I fell asleep. I guess I convinced myself that this man was in my head in order to cope. I wasn't doing any drugs or alcohol, and I have no history of night terrors or schizophrenia. But after that night, I never saw him again. But to this day, I'll never forget that night. Although I've had other supernatural experiences that involve objects suddenly moving, bizarre premonitions that can come true. I've heard other ghost stories and seen strange videos on YouTube, and I've never seen or heard of a story where a ghost had this sort of extreme high-definition detail. Every other ghost story is a dark figure or some blobby image. Or sometimes it doesn't even resemble a human at all, so I'm left wondering if perhaps this was an angel. Dreams of my deceased brother. My older brother passed away 9 years ago. I was the one who found him. Last night I dreamt of him again. There have been periods spanning months when I dream of him nearly every night. I notice when I'm stressed, he comes more often. The dreams sometimes don't feel like dreams, they feel like visitations. There's moments in these dreams where I come in and out of consciousness. Even the ones that aren't lucid, I still feel the pain in my chest, the sadness that he'll leave. I'm always trying to please him, to get him to stay, and I hug him and I feel like crying. even when I'm not conscious that I'm dreaming or that he's gone in real life. Sometimes he's just floating in the background like an extra in a movie and I don't realize he's there until I wake up. Sometimes they will begin as normal dreams, but the pain of losing him, the dread I feel keeping him near me, it's what wakes me up in general. Then we lock eyes and it introduces itself and hangs in the air between us. The knowledge that he's gone and this is a visitation. Once this happens, we become quiet and a sadness overtakes the space. He never smiles in my dreams. He's always so somber and sad. I used to believe dreams were just from your subconscious mind, and I dream of him a lot because I always miss him. But something inside me is telling me this is different. I shouldn't be seeing him so frequently. It's like he's trying to tell me something. Like his soul is stuck here in that plane and he needs me to free him. In my dreams, he never smiles. He's sad, somber, and quiet. It's almost like he's counting on me to wake up in my dreams so we can talk. And when I don't, he's disappointed. I feel like I'm going insane. Okay, this is a throwaway account because my friends know my actual account and I'd rather not have them think I'm crazy. I just wanted to share my story. I posted this on another one, but I wanted to find all the help I could. Okay, so like I always felt like I'm being followed or watched and so forth. And I've been told by those who are more close to the realm of the unnamed that, well, I've got a bad aura following me. I mean, I'm skeptical because that's crazy, but I've always had bad luck, and not enough to be followed by spirits, but recently something's been calling my name in my family's voices, and that's when I swear up and down they didn't call me. I've been having these dreams of people I don't know, and not to mention things in my room move where I haven't placed them. And then it's like I'm being pushed. We have steep stairs into the basement. I was carrying a laundry basket down and I was about halfway down and it felt like I was shoved. I ended up having an awkward angle at the bottom of the stairs with my basket on top of me. My right leg ended up being dislocated from ankle down. I just feel this hatred that I don't know where it's from, and one of my friends who's a pagan made this weird little jar for me saying it would keep me safe. I honestly wanted anything to fix the issue, so I took it. He told me to place it anywhere in the room and it'd be fine. The next morning it was shattered on my floor. I don't have wood floors, I have pretty soft carpet, so it confused me because it was like shattered. I don't know what to do anymore and I'm getting paranoid and I'm also resorting to strangers on the internet. Does anybody know what this is? The Newby Church Ghost. Photo and history of the church, and photo. I have always been interested in ghost photos, and over 30 years ago when I was 9, I saw the famous Newby Church photo for the first time. I never found the photo scary, just weird as the book said it was supposed to be a monk. But when did he have this face covering? I also found it very strange that the book said he was 9 feet tall. I visited Newby Church around 10 or 11 years ago and I took a photo myself on the second visit. I carefully recreated the Reverend's original photo and turned out the ghost wasn't 9 feet tall but only around 6'3". What I've always found strange is how the church was only built in the 1870s, but the ghost is clearly standing on the altar steps. No church or other building was on the site before. I did research. I'd seen a lot of comments online about how the robe appears to be draped over the altar step. But if you look closely, this appears to be a spill or a stain on the negative. There are a few uneven marks at the bottom of this shape. Also, the stain extends to near the ghost's waist. You can see a cone shape in front of the figure. If this ghost is real, then why has no one ever seen or photographed it? I've seen a photo of the altar from the 1890s that doesn't show anything. It's been suggested that the ghost might be a medieval leper, which explains the face covering, and also the deformed left shoulder. He could be standing on what was an open space in his time period, as the ground level would have dropped when the excavations were done for the church.